expected to get a new deputy president before the State of the Nation address, but that was not to be. Over the weekend, Deputy President David Mabuza told mourners at his brother's funeral that he'd resigned. After that, the president told us to hang 10. Then on Monday, Paul Mashatile and the ANC's deputy president were sworn in, but the country remains guessing on the deputy president matter. Let's discuss this and the 2023 Sona with political analyst and author Dr. Oscar van Heerden. Doctor, good morning and thank you very much for your time. It's a day before Sona and some politicians are quite doubtful the president can articulate something that citizens can rally behind at this point. Is it mere politicking or what?
Good morning, Fundo. I mean, I think that it is, of course, this is a period of politicking. Opposition parties need to also show their relevance, and they must demonstrate that they are there to oppose. And so a lot of them will be saying all manner of things. But I think where there's agreement is that this is not going to be an easy Sona for the president. There is a huge trust deficit between the ruling party and the people. People simply don't believe the promises that politicians make because the proof is in the pudding. I'm sure, as you can imagine, Mfundo, the emphasis in this Sona is going to be around two issues, I think. The one is the energy crisis. How are we going to sort out it? And two is going to revolve around how are we going to create jobs.
Now, last year's theme was more around consensus building, with the state focused on creating an environment which would allow the private sector to invest and somewhat unleash the dynamism of the economy. But did the private sector actually come to the party?
Well, there's been huge commitments, as you know. President Ramaphosa has had this drive of investment. There has now been about 3 investment conferences held, huge commitments by the private sector. Again, coming out of the mining in Daba, again, huge commitments. And some of those commitments have actually translated into practical projects, job-created projects. But more needs to be done, definitely.
I love that phrase, commitments, because if we speak of the investment conference that was held not so long ago last year, there was, I think, investment commitments to the tune of around 355 billion. But for the ordinary person sitting at home, they still have this argument, internal argument, that what does commitment really mean? There is investment, there's commitment, meaning in commitment, there's a possibility that there might be no investment. Just unpack that for us.
No, absolutely. I mean, a commitment is based on trust. I say that I'm committed to invest X amount of money for these projects, and it is up to government in partnership with those in the private sector that made the commitments to make sure that it translates into something physical, something tangible. And you're absolutely right. You know, part of this, the problem with the Sona is that for example, a big emphasis, I think, is going to be, as I said, around the energy issue. And people are going to say, we've heard it all before. You've said how you're going to fix it. It's been 14 years. It has been 14 years with all manner of solutions and so forth. The proof is in the pudding. Unless you keep the lights on from now until the general election, I think the people are going to seriously vent their anger at the polling stations.
There was a good move that government actually pulled this week. They've shared a commitments review booklet, so to say, of some of the commitments from 2022 and just giving us a status update of what they've been able to achieve. I will tackle that a bit later on, but I still want to take you back to private sector coming to the party. I know the SACP is among those that were strongly opposed to creating that conducive environment for business. We know that there was an expansion of the tax incentive for the private sector to perhaps hire more people. But again, I ask, did we see them come to the party? Were more citizens employed? Has it worked?
There's been slow and gradual employment. This is true. But there's also huge challenges. You know, we hear certain people from the business leadership saying that they no longer have faith in government and that solutions are with the private sector. Well, my counter to that is that the private sector should have been coming to the party long, long ago. There has been talk of a social compact. It is our own private sector that is not sufficiently investing in infrastructure and in the country, hoarding billions of rands under the guise that there's no policy certainty and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that we mustn't forget, Mfundo, that it was our own domestic business that propped up the illegitimate system of apartheid and funded that because they wanted black cheap labor and so.
But there's also been wide-ranging reforms. So if we look at Operation Vulindlela, there have been wide-ranging reforms there. So the private sector, to a certain extent, some would say, cannot say that government, or at least this particular government, has not been trying to make the environment more conducive for them. But there's also that argument, at least from those that are more left-leaning, that when you speak of big business, their priority is profit. And you want to give them a responsibility of taking care of the citizens. Whereas if the opportunity were to come, if there was an opportunity to automate, they're bringing in machines and letting go of personnel. Do you believe that is really the case?
Well, there is a strong argument, particularly in the mining sector, that says if we want to be more efficient, we need to mechanize. We need to move with the 21st century, which is to use machines to do the digging and so on and so forth, which, of course, does result in job losses. I mean, the more you mechanize, the less you need labor-intensive and laborers. So this is a big problem. You would recall another simple example, Fundo, is, when you travel around the United States or Europe, when you stop at a petrol station, you are the one who is doing your own petrol, swiping your own credit card. There's no one to help you. It's completely mechanized. And in South Africa, that is a sector that employs tens of thousands of people. So there is this toss-up between mechanization and actually creating employment for people to put food on the table. It's a big, big dilemma, and it's not one that we're going to resolve anytime soon.
And the private sector has a right to focus on profit if really that is what they're there for. Then to the internal politics of the ANC. Some are still saying there's something that we need to read into the time it's taking to install Paul Mashatile as perhaps the deputy president of the country. Do you believe there's something to read into what we've seen just from Saturday at the very least, when Didi Mabuza spoke at his brother's funeral, to the swearing in, and then a number of politicians coming out and reminding citizens that indeed it is the prerogative of the president to install a deputy or even reconfigure his cabinet?
Well, just on the last point, you're absolutely right, and those people are correct. It is the prerogative of the president and the president alone. Of course, the president is a person, a human being, and can be influenced. And I think what Didi Mabuza was doing at his brother's funeral was playing politics. I think that what precipitated that announcement was perhaps a move within the ANC, which suggested that there are certain people in the ANC around the president that is not comfortable with Paul Mashatile being the deputy president, and they wanted to exert that kind of influence on the president. And I think that Didi Mabuza decided, this is my buddy, we've come a long way together, and I'm preempting that kind of anti-Paul sentiment by announcing prematurely that I'm resigning and opening the gate for my friend Paul Mashatile to come in, which then, of course, was a move on the chessboard. I think that's what was at play. However, having said that, Mfundo, I do think that the president needs to be aware that the deputy president was elected at the last elective conference that just recently in December came to an end. So the ANC members, branches have spoken, and they knew exactly who they were electing as deputy president, and the fact that there is a possibility that that person is in pole position to become the next president of the country. And I think the president needs to take that into consideration.
So, in fact, according to you, there is some discomfort around Paul Mashatile's ascension to that second in command. Why exactly would that be?
Yes.
What exactly makes some within the political party uncomfortable, according to you at the very least?
Well, Firstly, if you go back to the elective conference, Paul Mashatile was not part of the slate or the list of the CR camp, nor was he actually on the slate or the list of the Mkhize camp. At the very, very 11th hour, people around Mashatile convinced him to be on the Mkhize slate, but I'm told reliably that he was very uncomfortable with that. It's not what he wanted. And of course, we all know now because of the, what shall we call it, the problem or the challenge between Oscar Mabuyane and Ronald Lamola not wanting to stand aside for the deputy president position. This is why Paul Mashatile actually came in and garnered the necessary votes to become the deputy president. So the CR camp, or those people around the president, was not necessarily comfortable with Paul Mashatile winning the position. But the fact of the matter is he was supported also within the CR camp. Northern Cape, for example, nominated Paul Mashatile as deputy president. And so I think that is what pulled him across the line. And unfortunately, you don't always get what you want. Paul Mashatile is the deputy president of the ANC, and I think that President Ramaphosa is going to be very hard-pressed to not make him the deputy president of the country.
Mr. van Heerden, thank you very much for your time. That was political analyst and Dr. Oscar van Heerden speaking to us. To the story.